different designers and different architects work in different ways. So, for some people that line is in a slightly different spot.
Hi, I'm Beth Beesky, the founder of More Time to Design and your host of the Design Dialogues podcast. I've been a designer for the last 12 years and I've run my own studio for 5. And I know how hard it is to run a successful business. You not only need to be great at designing, but you need to be great at all the other things as well. I created More Time to Design, a software platform to help designers run efficient studios, and I've created the Design Dialogue podcast to help us all learn together. Each week, we will meet professionals who are at the top of their game doing things that help us run our studios. We'll have conversations with social media managers, interior design mentors, copywriters, stylists, photographers, suppliers, and also designers who have been in the game for a long time and who have such a wealth of knowledge to share. I hope that each week you feel inspired and informed at the end of each of our design dialogues. So join me for the Design Dialogue podcast. Welcome to episode 12 of the Design Dialogues podcast. This week I'm talking with architect Jennifer Crawford from Our New Home Coach. Before we get to the dialogue though, I wanted to tell you a little bit about what has been happening at More Time to Design. We have just released some new features on More Time to Design. More advanced schedule tools, increased capability with our supplier list, and more connectivity across the platform. If you are not quite ready yet to sign up for a free 30-day trial, but would like to see how the platform can help you build a better business, make sure to book into a product demonstration where myself and the team will show you all the features of More Time to Design. I will pop a link in the show notes for how to book a demo. Also, if you are enjoying the podcast, I would love for you to leave a review. Reviews are one of the best ways for people to find the podcast. If you are unsure of how to leave a review, I will put in the show notes some simple instructions to follow. I really do appreciate you taking the time to leave a review. This week on the podcast, we are meeting Jennifer Crawford. Jennifer is an architect with many years of varied experience, from working with volume builders to finding her love for residential design and helping people build better homes. I talked to Jennifer about the junction between architecture and interior design and how the two professions can work well together. I hope you enjoy this design dialogue. Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Design Dialogues podcast. And today we are meeting architect Jennifer Crawford from Our New Home Coach. Hi Jennifer.
Hi Beth.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's lovely to be here.
So I love to start by asking everyone, what can you see out your window today?
Oh, yes. Well, out my window, where my office is on Darling Street, Balmain, which is like the main street of Balmain.
Yeah.
So I can kind of see everyone walking up and down the street and a few old heritage buildings, and it's beautiful sunshine and
Perfect.
yeah.
Beautiful outlook. It would be kind of like a moving picture all the time.
Yeah, so where our office is, I rent a desk in another interior designer's office.
Yeah.
And she's done a beautiful job here. So one side we've got the Darling Street sort of promenade, I guess, and then the other side you can see the Harbour Bridge and the city sort of skyline. So
Perfect.
Yeah, so it's a great space to work in.
Yeah, very inspiring space to work in, I imagine. So tell me a little bit about your business and where you've gotten to where you are today. I know you have a couple of different kind of things that you work with people and interior designers. So I'd love to kind of know, how did you end up where you are today?
Okay, so yes, I'm a registered architect and have been registered for a very long time now. But my background is I've worked in a few different architectural practices, but also for large construction companies and developers and small construction companies and home building companies and things like that. So I've worked on a variety of different types of projects, but always my preferred focus, I think, is residential work. I kind of get it, and I kind of sort of feel it in my person,
Yeah.
you know. And as in the role that I had for the large community developer, my role there was as design coordinator. So what that meant is that I approved, everyone had to submit their house plans to me for approval before they went to council.
Yeah, wow.
So I saw hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of house plans in that role from all different sort of volume builders, mainly volume builders.
Yeah.
And I could suggest things, whether they would be incorporated or not is another story. But I was responsible for the design guidelines there, and developing the design guidelines and enforcing the design guidelines, those sorts of things.
Yeah.
And I would see a lot of the people who were buying those houses and building those houses, and I would have lots of conversations with them about how to meet our guidelines and how they could actually improve their houses.
Yeah.
And I thought back then, I thought, well, quite a few people need a lot of just small amounts of architectural advice. They don't necessarily need me to design their house for them.
Yes.
But just giving them a little bit of assistance, and also talking about their kind of wants and needs, I guess, can go a long way into helping them make the right decisions.
Yeah, because I imagine so often that like people hear architect and they just go, no, I don't, it's too big, it's too much money, like I just don't need that. And I imagine you must have seen some real doozies of plans in that role, and you kind of like, oh my goodness, just a few little tweaks and it would make such a world of difference, kind of thing. So I imagine there must be so many people who are like that, who just need that small amount of guidance and advice that would make such a difference to their home.
Yeah, absolutely. And to talk through, they might be building with a volume builder, as many people do, and you know, that's fine, but there's a few things, like, you know, whether you place a window here or here, or whether the whole house is placed this way on a block, or you know, through 90 degrees or whatever, makes a huge difference. And you know, whether there's an extra door you can add, or you know, something you can open up, like there's lots of little bits and pieces that can really make a difference. And also talking to people about what their actual needs are, so that they can get some clarity, rather than they're just buying this thing because they think that's what they should buy, you know. It's like, do we really need this? You know, how is our family growing, or how's our family, you know, people at the other end, once their family's kind of grown, you know, how's it sort of, if kids are leaving or going to uni or something like that, how's their life changing there? So there's a few different life stages and tweaks that can happen.
So true, isn't it? Like, you quite often you have, I mean, I've seen it with my clients, and I'm sure, you know, there's crossover here between interior designers and architects. You have a client that comes with you with kind of this like wish list of things, and you kind of go, well, if we're going to build all of this and fit all this in, you're going to need like a massive house, and it's going to cost a massive amount of money. But then when you actually kind of challenge them a little bit and ask them, well, why do you need 3 living spaces, and why does everyone need, you know, their own study and all that kind of stuff? And you kind of like, you actually drill down to why they need that. So often they're like, I don't know, just because. So
So I get into a lot of questions about how people actually live in the house, like, you know, and since COVID, there's a lot of working from home and all that sort of stuff, and so it's really changed how people use their homes. And sometimes it's like in the working from home scenario, like pre-COVID, people may have done that like 1 or 2 days a week, if at all. And now they might have 2 people working full-time at home, or they might have, you know, a combination of working from home and going out. And sometimes it depends on the work too. Like some people need a separate room that's private in order to do their work. Other people, it may not be that they need, you know, a separate room, and it might be that it's a joinery solution, you know, a really nice sort of built-in desk that can close up at the end of the day, that sort of thing. And that can really work for them. So, and where that's located in the house might mean that, you know, one room might perform like 2 or 3 jobs and be a really hard-working room, you know, at different times of the day.
Yeah.
And when different people are in the house, that sort of thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, wow. So I like so many questions out of that, and I'm going to try and make them succinct. Yeah. So one is around like working with a volume builder. So I haven't done a lot of this work myself, but I know some designers come in and they might be working with people kind of, they're either at that stage of kind of commissioning a home with a volume builder, and, you know, their kind of floor plans are quite restrictive, and, you know, there's limitations to what you can do. And obviously this is how long is a piece of string, but if there were kind of like 2 or 3 things that you would say, maybe the most common things that you saw that were able to be changed, or that you would like, oh, there's like these plans really, if you could just tweak that one thing, it makes such a difference. Or as you mentioned, like orientation on the block or something like that. Like if a designer is meeting with a client or working with a client that's working with a volume builder, what are maybe those top 2 or 3 things that you would say to look out for in the plans that kind of they could change or suggest to change that would make a big difference to the finished product?
Yeah, it does depend on the builder, on the volume builder, because some are more flexible than others.
Yeah.
And in some cases there's no changes whatsoever, and then you're kind of stuck, right? And you've got to make sure you're picking the right one, because you can't change it. In other cases, there's builders that say, yeah, we can change this, change that, change the other. One of the things that I was always talking to people about, and I still think there's potential for this, is there's kind of this, in Australia we have this sort of obsession for open plan living.
Yes.
Now, there's times when that works, and there's other times when not so much, especially in large, like 2-story houses, and the amount of heating and cooling that's required for, you know, a big open plan house like that can be huge. So whether there's an opportunity to place doors, or, you know, even like really pretty, you know, glass doors and things in corridors and places like that, just to break up the house into sort of smaller zones, so that those heating and cooling areas, you know, depending on how you live in the house and where it's occupied and blah blah blah, you might be able to reduce the amount of heating and cooling that you use to live in those particular spots. So there's things like that, you know, putting the odd door, or, you know, feature door, or things like that in a corridor, and things like that. Others are just possibly relocating windows. If there's a, you know, depending on the orientation of the block, maybe there's a chance to move a window from one elevation across to the other, or reduce it or expand it, or something like that. Those sorts of things. And then you can often play with you know, kitchens and kitchen cabinetry and butler's pantries and all those sorts of things. But that's a little bit of a how long is a piece of string?
But I suppose as well,
how far you want to push it.
Yeah, and I suppose these questions, like a little bit comes down to what you were talking about really actually finding out how they live. Like, you know, we do get, I mean, we see so many open plan homes now. And I do sometimes think that there are a few people that are kind of like challenging that a little bit now, because I think if you've lived in an open plan home, you kind of realize it's not all it's cracked up to be on multiple reasons, especially if you've got like a family and there's multiple rooms doing multiple things, and it's, you know, they can be very challenging to live in. But yeah, I suppose it does come down to really challenging them and finding out how do they live and what do they want out of their, their home. Yeah, that's awesome. And then the other thing that I wanted to kind of come back to was around how you have found clients pre and post COVID. So obviously the working from home thing is a big thing, and, you know, more and more people are needing studies and more dedicated workspaces. Are you finding that trend is continuing, or do you think that people are kind of not so much now, they're kind of maybe moving back to what it was like pre-COVID? Or do you think that this needing kind of studies or dedicated studies is here to stay?
It's kind of interesting, because if we go back, say, like, I don't know, even 10 years, 15 years maybe, studies were like definitely a thing. Like the home office thing, because people had, you know, back then more desktop computers, and they needed like a dedicated space. And then in a few years, like, everyone got, you know, laptops and iPads and phones and all this sort of stuff. And so the study, and also, like, you know, back in the day, people had printers and you know, all this sort of stuff, right? And all of that kind of changed. And then there was the question, well, like, do you really need this study anymore? Because everyone's got a mobile device, whether it's a laptop or an iPad or whatever, and they can sit at the kitchen bench and they can do whatever. And, you know, there's not such a need for printing anymore, and, you know, all those things. So maybe and then the study sort of fell away a bit. And then, like, COVID happened. And so it came roaring back. In a big way, because all of a sudden people were like not just casually working on the kitchen bench anymore, but they were like doing their job at home. And so, and, you know, all the Zooms and all that sort of stuff. So all of a sudden they needed a dedicated space again that could be quiet, and where they could have those conversations and that sort of thing. So I think there's always going to be room for that sort of space. Whether it's a dedicated room and that's the only job of that room, I'm not so sure. Because I think that, you know, in some people's houses, they like to have a guest room for visitors, because they might have family that come and stay with them, you know, in a semi-regular basis. Whether there's a study that can also work as that guest room, and do those two jobs, or whether there's an area that's at the end of, you know, say a dining room or a living room or something that has a really nice joinery in it, and that's where the workspace is, and that happens, you know, during the day. But then when kids come home from school and everyone's, you know, there for dinner or whatever, maybe that gets closed away, and that's just, you know, a nice joinery in at the end of the room. Because especially because I'm in the inner west of Sydney, and a lot of houses here are, you know, quite small. So people don't necessarily have huge amounts of space for these things. So it's trying to get rooms to work harder and do multiple jobs, not necessarily at the same time, but, you know, different times of day, different times of year, whatever. Those rooms can fill all sorts of different roles.
And I suppose, like, I mean, that comes down to as well, you know, for, like, you know, interior designers, that's something to really be thinking about, especially when you're maybe designing your joinery in your bedrooms. Like, can you arrange the joinery in a way that maybe kind of future-proofing the room. So possibly if they're being designed for a small child, can you future-proof the joinery so there's possibly can be a desk included in the joinery? And as you said, like at the end of a kitchen or something like that. Like I think if interior design, if you can be smart about your joinery design, like it's a really great way to add value to the client experience, but also to the home, because, you know, especially, you know, in our inner city areas, these rooms do need to work really, really hard. So yeah, I think being clever and smart about the way you design your joinery can really, you know, turn what is just a wardrobe into a study and all of that kind of stuff. Yeah.
So for example, I had one some clients in Leichhardt, and they were just doing they had an existing, you know, 2-bedroom bungalow.
Yeah.
And we basically ripped off the back and did a new half a level down, half a level up, living, dining, kitchen downstairs, new master bedroom and bathroom upstairs. But what we were able to do was, with the half a level upstairs and a slight little landing there, was actually add a joinery unit in there that ended up becoming like effectively the study.
Yeah.
Even though it's in a sort of wider corridor space. So on one side there's a day bed, on the other side there's this joinery unit, so 2 people can sit next to each other and work. But it's not necessarily a dedicated room. And so that meant that all the other dedicated rooms, because these clients were tossing up whether they wanted it to be whether they wanted to have the 4 bedrooms or the 3 bedrooms. And the 4 bedrooms, once you pushed it to the 4 bedrooms, it made everything just a little bit tight. But if you took out that, then their main bedroom is very generous, and bathrooms are generous. So everything has more of a generosity of size and scale. But their study is effectively in this sort of widened
corridor
kind of hallway landing type thing with a skylight over. So it has it has a nice feel to it, and when the clients were working from home, they felt like they could still do work because it was quiet enough, but they still felt connected to the rest of the house because they still had young kids, and so wanted to keep an eye and an ear out for them. They didn't feel isolated in the house.
I think that's a really clever thing. Like I think designers, when you're looking at plans, like kind of look at what is maybe a dead space, or, you know, kind of, and what can you value add to that space to kind of, as you say, like if you don't have to, if you can accommodate that study in a passageway, you can make your bedroom slightly bigger and everything feels, you know, there's nothing better than a slightly, like as you said, like it's just a bit more generous and it just feels really lovely kind of thing. That's really helpful. I think that's so, I think, just those few little things can really change a home kind of thing. So that's awesome to hear. So one of the things that, like we were talking just before we started, like my background is coming from offices, like multidisciplinary offices. I've worked alongside architects kind of thing. But some people who are listening to this might be just starting out, or they might never have worked in an office that has an architect. And I really believe that kind of, you know, your business is as strong as the person who you know is in your phone book you can pick up and ask a question to when you need it. How do you, like, what would be your advice to maybe newish designers or people who are just starting out their businesses about creating that connection and relationship with an architect? Is it best to kind of find someone in their area, like, or someone who does a similar style? Like, what would be your kind of top tips for creating that relationship, that working relationship with an architect?
Yeah, I think a lot of that is to do with networking and finding people, and if there's events and things that are on. I mean, that was a bit tricky during the COVID times, but events are back, back on now. And so you'll often have sort of trade type shows and things like that, where a lot of the manufacturers and people will have shows, and you can get to meet a lot of people in those sorts of events.
Yeah.
So whether it's someone who's local to you, it depends on how you work.
Yeah.
Like if you need someone local and just want to sort of pop around and have a chat, or if you need someone who works on the same style, as you mentioned, the same style of project,
yeah,
then that can be good too. I think there's an opportunity for architects and interior designers to work even more closely together.
Yeah.
Because it is a slightly different skill set between the two.
Yeah.
And I have, quite a few interior designer friends, and I'm involved in some interior designer groups, Facebook groups and things like that. And I find that the combination of the two goes really well together, because a lot of stuff that interior designers are really focused on, architects aren't too fussed about.
Yeah.
I don't
and
want that to
vice
sound
versa.
rude. Yeah, I don't want that to sound rude, but
no,
things like, the furniture and the cushions and the artwork and whatever. From an architect's point of view, you go, well, you can choose whatever you like. I really don't mind. And then you get into stuff where there's a bit of overlap, like, floor finishes and tiling and, joinery finishes and that sort of thing. But I would still often talk to a designer about those sorts of things, because, I have a few sort of designer friends that know everything there is to know about tiles, for example, know far more about tiles than me, or know far more about paint colors than me, or that sort of thing. But at the same time, for me, the thing is about the, it might be the window locations, or the how the house sits on the block, and how it's relative to the site boundaries, and all the, the council controls. And I imagine that sort of stuff, interior designers, their eyes glaze over. It's like, don't care.
It is a little bit like, I must do. So I have an architect that we've worked on a couple of projects with, and she's delightful, and her whole team is just a delight to work with. And the first project we worked on, there was kind of this little dance where it was kind of like, so where is the line that, like, where is that line? And between what she was interested in and what I was interested in, but yet it was very much her project. To start with, it was very much her project kind of thing. And it is a bit of a dance, because it's not like a blanket rule that all architects aren't interested in tiles. Like, some are going to be really passionate about it and want to do the whole thing, where other people are like, you've picked a grey tile for the wall, right, done, let's move on, kind of thing. And so I find that really interesting, that dance, when you first start working with, like, you start building a working relationship with an architect. It might take you a little bit of time to find out, okay, exactly where do they stop and I start. And I remember one site meeting, and that was when I realized where the line was, where they would, like, her and the builder were talking about something so technical, about some obscure little detail that I was like, and they were like, Beth, do you have an opinion? And I'm like, no, all good. Can't really follow what you're talking about. I'm thinking it's some I don't even know what it was. And I was just like, that's the line. That's the line. I don't need to know about that. And then in the reverse, like a couple of weeks later, I was on site. We were talking to the builder about some lighting placement, and like, it was, it was kind of some feature pendants and wall lights and all this kind of stuff. And we turned to the architect. She's like, whatever, don't care. And we found our line. We found where we like, and it was just, I think it can be such a, like, the relationship with, I mean, it's the holy trinity, isn't it? If you get an awesome builder and an awesome architect and an awesome interior designer, and, maybe throw in a great landscape architect designer as well. But once you work out that working relationship, and you work out where everyone, like what's the sweet spots for everyone, it's a great working relationship, but it can take a little bit of time to work out, well, where is everyone's boundaries?
Yeah, absolutely. And different designers and different architects work in different ways. So, for some people that line is in a slightly different spot.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I mean, I doubt you want to talk too much about waterproofing and things like that.
No, it needs to be there.
Yeah. So, there's things like waterproofing details and whatever that, or, insulation or whatever, all those things that can.
And it's interesting, like I always find it interesting on site. Like I think I have a curiosity about all of that kind of stuff. And I know that knowing it helps me be a better designer. But in terms of making sure it's done properly or specifying it or all of that kind of stuff, I'm not that interested.
No,
so
fair enough.
Kind of I like to know, but I also like to know that if I have a question, I can ask them. So it's that working relationship that's, I think it can be gold kind of once you work at it and kind of work out
absolutely
the right mix kind of thing. And I suppose as well, it also helps. That leads to my next question about when a client comes to an interior designer and the interior designer is kind of starting to approach the line where they're like, this is a bit beyond what I can do. But at the same time, it's not that full jump to a full scope for an architect. How do you think the best way for the interior designer to what's the best way for the interior designer to bring the architect into the project without the architect? Because I have seen this happen where the architect kind of swoops in and takes over, and it's like, oh, okay, like that balance is a bit off then. When you've got interior designers who need to bring architects on, because quite often it's the other way around. The client goes to the architect first and then they bring the interior designer on. And that's kind of works that hierarchy. When it's the reverse, how do you see that working well, and how do you see it working badly?
Well, I'll answer badly first. That's kind of easy. Badly is when ego gets in the way and, it's like, oh, well, we don't need that person because I can do it all for you. And that's badly. But I think where it works well, and we've got a job like this at the moment where I'm working with an interior designer, and it really is her project because she has been working with the clients on previous projects for a couple of years. So there's definitely an established relationship there. And she's doing amazing work on this latest project, but she just needs some additional help in terms of approvals and stuff, because the things that the client wants to do has tipped the project from being exempt development to being complying development. And so all of a sudden there's other people in play, there's engineers involved, there's certifiers involved, there's getting a whole heap of documents together for that approval that may be sort of outside the standard scope of this designer. So that's why she's kind of got me on board to help out in getting those approvals and things happening.
And so I suppose it's really, I mean, like so many things, it comes down to communication. But I suppose it's as well like communication between the designer and architect, but then also communication between the designer and the client about where possibly their limitations is. I think there's nothing wrong with saying to a client, this is beyond what I can do. And I'm bringing in my colleague who I've worked with and I've got a relationship with to help us get this, this next bit over the line. And so, I suppose it just comes down to that communication. As long as it's clear, we all know who is running the project, who's reporting to who. Like, is the architect going to deal straight with the client, or is it all going to go through the interior designer? Like working out that communication and that workflow, if everyone's clear about what's happening from the start, then in theory it should run smoothly.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of defining, and in this particular project, the clients are really clear on what they want to do, and that's great.
Yeah.
And that kind of sets the parameters for everyone else. So yeah, I'm more than happy to play a support role in that one, because I think it'll just be an amazing project once it's done. So
yeah,
I'll do whatever I can to help get it
and
there.
is that something that you do a lot of, like come in as that support role to an interior designer?
To be honest, it's relatively new to me, because I kind of, up to this point, just been dealing mainly with the clients and discussions about their projects and all the rest. But as I mentioned right at the beginning, I'm currently, working in an office, an interior designer's office.
Yeah.
So being in that environment, there's the occasional question that comes, what about this or what about that? And I'm more than happy to answer those, because it's, it's part of the vibe, I guess. But once I got thinking about that, I thought, well, maybe there's more interior designers that actually need that little bit of help, and it's not that they, need a whole new project designed or building designed or whatever, that they've kind of got that under control, but they just need a little bit of assistance to get it to where it needs to be. And so I thought, well, why don't I offer that as a service as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, it's such a, as you said, like it's that tipping point, isn't it? Where it's like, it's not a full design pack, it's not a full scope of works, but it's guidance and yeah.
So I've just added that to my website, actually, as a little section for interior designers, and I'm happy to work with them and get it.
Tell me a little bit about that process. So in terms of is it purely advice? Is it actual documentation? Is it, all the way through to consultants? Because I think that's something that, like, I know from my experience, some stuff with like council I'm okay with. When we start moving into the world of consultants and, needing engineering and all that kind of stuff, and I suppose this actually loops back around to where we were talking about that relationship between a designer and architect, like how successful your business is the relationships you have. So if you're not doing a lot of council work, you might not have, a surveyor, structural engineer, stormwater person in your list of people you can call easily. And so is that part of, I suppose, like the service that you offer, that you coordinate that level of information for them?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I have people like certifiers and structural engineers, hydraulic engineers, those sorts of, even, landscape people, whatever.
Yeah.
And, I'm happy to have all the conversations with those, or coordinate those people, but also coordinate their work with the sort of project documentation. Now, whether designers need me to do drawings for them, sometimes, but not always.
Yeah.
And so I kind of adapt that to suit, because often designers have their own sort of people to do drawings, and to keep it kind of, I guess, clean. It's, if there's all sorts of drawing packs already happening, well, let's just keep with those, and maybe I can add a few comments or add where there's notes or things like that can get those drawings to where they need to be.
And one thing that I suppose this is my own personal experience. So I find it's quite often there's like a lot of industries, there's a lot of lingo in our industry kind of thing, and there's interior design lingo, and then there's a whole other world of architecture lingo, which sometimes I'm like, oh God, like, can you just explain that to me? And I must admit, like, when it gets to the point of going, okay, I need to talk to a consultant, and I'm like, which consultant am I needing to talk to? Like, how do I ask them what I actually need to ask them without sounding silly? What would be your kind of, how have you seen that work well from an interior designer? Like, have you observed an interior designer that does that well, where they're like, okay, the information, it might not be, my drawings might not be, they might be very different from how an architect might present them. You know, generally, you know, a designer might be doing not a complete set pack of drawings, especially in a project where maybe it's crept away, like it wasn't initially a point where it was going to need to go to council, but, you know, the scope has creeped or things have changed and so you need to now go to council. How have you seen designers handle that well, like the approaching to the consultants that might really be outside of their, you know, scope of normal people they deal with and all that kind of stuff? Like, does it come back to, once again, just the communication, having it all presented? Like, don't worry if you don't know all the right words, just kind of, if you have that, if you can communicate it in a way that is clear, you know, they'll come back and ask you the questions they need.
Yeah, pretty much. It's like, don't be scared to ask the question, you know.
Yeah.
I'm always asking people dumb questions, and, you know, I like, can I ask a dumb question? And people invariably say there's no such thing as a dumb question.
Yeah.
But, you know, this is what we do. It's the only way that you can find out is by asking questions.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, and if someone's not making things clear, you keep asking, you know, because you need clarity and you need to understand. And it might be, I once worked in an office like years ago as a student, and there was an architect that I worked with, and he said he was on site once and he was RSJing about, you know, something. So an RSJ stands for rolled steel joist.
Yes.
And he was on site once with a client, and you know, and we'll just put an RSJ here, we'll put an RSJ there, and we'll do this, do that. And, you know, went through this entire meeting, and there's a whole like site team there, blah, blah, blah. And then at the end, like after the meeting, someone came up to him, what's an RSJ? And so he kind of went, oh, okay. So yeah, it's like, if you don't understand, then go just ask.
Yeah.
Like, it's not the end of the world.
And I suppose as long as, I think, like, and I always have this attitude with everything. It's like, it makes you, the more information you know, you might not need to use it every day, but it makes you a better designer. And, you know, for the next project that it comes along, you'll have a little bit more information and a little bit more knowledge than you did the last time. So it's kind of like, it can be daunting, but if you can get kind of, like, I suppose, over your own maybe ego or insecurities about it, just go for it, kind of thing. Because, I mean, most people, I mean, there are some people that won't be great, but there are most people who will love talking about the thing that they love doing every day. So, you know, it's like most builders will talk your ear off if you want to talk to them about something. So I've found with a lot of consultants, it's the same. So, I mean, we've touched on a lot of this already, but I would love, I mean, you've got so many years of experience in the industry across many kind of different things. Like, it's been very varied, your career. What advice would you give to young architects and designers starting out, especially if they might not be clear about where do they want to go? Like, I mean, you've got a love of residential, but when you start out, you kind of be like, oh, do I want residential? Do I want commercial? Do I want large scale? Like, what would be your advice?
Oh, that's a big question. That's a really big question. It's like go looking for things, go searching, you know, and even finding finding, well, there's kind of two ways about finding work, finding an employer. It's whether you stay with one employer for a long time in a sort of master student kind of relationship or whatever, and learn from them, or it's whether you move around to lots of different places to get experience in how they work, and different people take different paths. And I do like learning from other people, and even now, even when I've been have my own business for a while, I still seek out gurus to go and have conversations with them about the best ways to approach stuff, or the best ways to deliver things, that sort of thing. So it's always being open and looking for things, and finding people that work the way you would like to work, ideally, and go and talk to them.
I think that's really kind of like great advice, because I think it's not kind of just go, oh, well, I want to work in residential. It's like, well, what kind of residential do you want to work in? And like understanding, and I always think, I think it's the same for architecture and design, like whatever kind of your education is, your education kind of gets you to the front door and kind of just opens it, kind of thing. Like it is really an industry where you need to be constantly learning, because things are constantly changing and all of that kind of stuff. So I think having that attitude of, I'm just going to keep learning and keep trying and keep testing and moving around, I think is really great advice, because I think it can take a while for you to work out almost what you don't like doing, like what and you work it out pretty quickly. I think, like, you kind of like, I just don't like working with that sort of client that comes with that sort of project, so I'm gonna move away from that. But yeah, that's really kind of, I think, great advice. Thank you. So tell me, what are you looking forward to for the next 12 months in your business? We're kind of out of COVID and starting to get back to normal. Like, what are you looking forward to?
Well, I've got a couple of projects that are underway at the moment, and some that have been DA approved, and they're going. One is hopefully going to be starting construction in the next month or two, and another one probably early next year. And yes, I've got another one that maybe happening in the next couple of months. So there's all of those, because we know it takes so long to get things from when people first contact you and they're so excited, to by the time you actually get on site, can be a really long time.
Can be such a long time. And I think sometimes it's managing managing their expectations from the start, but sometimes you really have to be like the project's cheerleader, because their initial excitement wanes and ebbs, and and I always give my clients a bit of a pep talk when we start construction. Like, there's phases of construction, and you will love it and you'll hate it, and you'll love it and you'll hate it, and you'll be really over it and then you'll love it again, kind of thing. Like, it's a real journey that you get to go on. But I do think, especially if it goes through council and all of that kind of stuff, like managing clients' expectations and managing their energy around that can be crucial to the success of a job.
Yeah, that is huge. Like, even when I go to see people for my 1 hour or 2 hour sessions, and they'll start talking about what they want to have done by Christmas, and it's like, whoa, actually,
Christmas this year, Christmas next year.
what you've just described to me is like a 2.5 year project. And they're like, really? I'm like, yes, really. So it's kind of managing all of that, and also scary things like money and stuff like that. So it's often it's a lot of sometimes I think I burst a lot of bubbles for people.
But I think it's so much better to burst them at the start and then kind of,
Mhm.
I always like, it's like, you know, when a client comes in, they've got these grand plans and then you come along and you kind of burst all the bubbles and you're like, nah. And then you kind of, that's when you're able to take them on actually a really great journey, because you can kind of go, this is what we can deliver and it's even better than what you thought, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I know I was kind of wrapping the interview up, but I've just thought of another question that I would love to get your opinion on, or your take on at the moment. And, you know, we're in amongst, you know, a really interesting time. You know, just this morning on the news, they were talking about, you know, the lack of home approvals in New South Wales compared to the other Eastern Seaboard states. And we are, you know, we're really kind of hitting a bit of a housing shortage crisis here in New South Wales and, you know, across all of Australia. And of course, we've all heard of the, you know, the cost of building, you know, post-COVID and with inflation, all that kind of stuff. We're now kind of starting to come out of the other side of that COVID, the impacts that COVID had on the building industry. I know from, you know, just speaking to a couple of builders that I work with around, you know, there is a little bit of like pressures come off. It's not as frenetic as I think it was. What would, like, what's your kind of take at the moment, like read on the situation, just from what you're seeing around the supply and demand issues, but also the cost of building? Like, do you think it's peaked? Do you think it's just going to stay where it is? Do you think, like, what are you kind of seeing?
That's another really good question. Now, people have been talking for years, like forever, about the day that building costs come down. I'm yet to see that day.
I know, it's a little bit like once it's up, it's never coming down.
Yeah, so whether things plateau a bit or, you know, that sort of thing, don't know. But yeah, builders are starting to call designers about projects and things. So that is a change.
Yeah.
Rather than designers frantically, you know, calling every builder they know and saying, well, no, I'm, you know, busy for the next 18 months. You know? So also with the interest rate rises and things like that, I have noticed the impact of that on my business, like my level of inquiry. And because people have to, you know, obviously pay their mortgages. So it's whether they can get their heads around the cost of a renovation in addition to that. So, but in real life, you know, families are still growing, things are still changing, energy is not getting any cheaper. And so people are, now is probably a really good time to start thinking about it, because things do take so long to, you know, to get to site. And, you know, whether there's an opportunity now to use that time to think about what you're really after and what you really need, and, you know, getting some clarity around it, so that in, you know, a year's time or 2 years' time or something, maybe you're ready to hit the go button and maybe prepared for that. So,
and yeah, in terms of like building supplies, have you seen like my take that from the projects I've seen is that the issues are not as bad as they were. Like, we're starting to kind of get back to a bit of normality. How are you finding it?
Yeah, I don't have any jobs on site at the moment. Like, all mine are in sort of approvals, or so I can't really talk about material costs right this minute, but I have heard similar things. You know, a couple of years ago, timber was insane. And a lot of timber does come from places like Russia, and we know, you know, all the issues around those sorts of places, and supply chains, and, you know, ships getting stuck in the Suez Canal, and you know, all sorts of weird things. And I have heard stories of just shipping costs going through the roof, And when you're shipping things like tiles from Italy or things like that,
Yeah.
tiles are a very heavy product. So, the shipping costs of those end up quite high, and that can add to the cost of construction.
Yeah.
So it's quite frustrating too. Often there's fees and things that you don't necessarily see in the end product.
Yeah.
But for example, I saw an email yesterday about someone doing a project in North Sydney area, and them having to get a work zone for the work out the front, to get trucks and things. And that work zone was going to be about 14% of the cost of the project.
Yeah.
Which is huge.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's, and you'll never see that at the end of the day. Like it was just the money that you paid to have a truck deliver stuff. So then it becomes, okay, well, how do we manage this work zone, and do we need it for this long, or do we coordinate when it is, and so we can reduce, the number of truck movements, and when, and that when you're designing, you're not thinking about truck movements.
No. Can't say it's ever at the forefront of my brain.
Yeah. But once you've got the builder involved, and they're looking at how they manage the site and stuff, and okay, well, maybe we need a truck for 3 days rather than 5 days.
Yeah.
So can we reduce it that way? So there's so many factors that come into play with these things that need to be considered. And yeah, it's a nice thing to spend money on a nice kitchen benchtop, or a nice light fitting, or a nice tap, or something like that. Often there's money that goes into things that you never see. And sometimes it can be tricky to manage those things as well.
Definitely. Oh gosh, so much to think about. Like it really, I mean, I'm not talking to anyone who doesn't know this, but there are so many factors that you need to take into consideration that are beyond the pretty things that you see at the end of the day, kind of thing, which can really, change the bottom line of a budget of a project. So awesome.
Indeed.
So how can our community find you and get in contact with you?
Okay, so my business is called Our New Home Coach, and my website is ournewhomecoach.com.au, and you'll see my picture there, and what services I offer and that sort of thing. I'm also on Instagram, but I haven't posted there for a little while. I've been quiet there for a while, and I'm also in the designer therapy Facebook group and things like that. And I do have an Our New Home Coach Facebook page as well. So you can find me around and about the place.
And we will link to all of those in the show notes for everyone. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for coming on. It has been such a great discussion and dialogue. I've really learned so much, as I was fully expecting to from this. So thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Beth.
I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Design Dialogues with Jennifer Crawford. It really was full of so much helpful information when it comes to working alongside an architect or bringing an architect into your projects. I know that sometimes, especially for maybe designers that are newer to the industry or haven't had the experience of working with an architect, it can be quite daunting, but finding an architect or two that you can build a working relationship with is such a great thing for your studio. It can increase your workflow. It can make your work processes so much easier because you have someone to ask if you've got just a quick question. I really loved how Jennifer spoke about the good way of working with an architect when it comes to an interior designer, bringing the architect into the project. And of course, like so many of the discussions we've had, it comes down to the communication and being clear around what the communication is, where the boundary is between what the architect is doing and what the interior designer is doing. And I also think that her mention of kind of ego being checked at the door is so important. And it is definitely a red flag that maybe the architect is not quite the right person to work with if you feel their ego is getting in the way of the project running smoothly. I also really loved how Jennifer spoke about the costs of building not really coming down. I think that's generally a held belief throughout the industry. But I really loved how she spoke to the positive aspect of the economic downturn at the moment. Sometimes clients just put the brakes on when they feel money's getting tight and the budget might not be there. However, really helping to educate the client how long the process will take, especially if you are going to council, and that now is a great time to be doing that foundational work on the project and being in a position that when economic times might change and become more positive, that they are ready to go and that they have done all of the preparation work to getting to site and actually starting building. And I just think that is such a great tool that we have when we are talking to clients who might be a little bit hesitant about starting because they are unsure around the budget and what they are going to be able to afford. But by talking them through the timeline and how long the process will take, but also asking them to reflect on what are their true needs of the house. Do they need an extra living room? Do they need a separate study and a separate guest bedroom? Or can the two be one room that function each way when needed? I think this is a really important conversations we should be having with our clients at the moment, especially considering the economic environment we find ourselves in. So I hope you enjoyed this design dialogue with Jennifer Crawford, and I do encourage you to reach out to Jennifer if you have any questions or if you are looking for an architect to just do some small bits of work on your interior design projects where the scope maybe has gone beyond what you are comfortable doing. So I hope you have a great week, and I will see you next time for our next design dialogue. Thank you for listening to this design dialogue. I hope you have found it full of inspiration and helpful information to take into your design studio. If you like the podcast and want to hear more, consider sharing it or writing a review, as it helps us reach more people, and follow us wherever you get your podcasts. If you would like to unlock the power of effortless studio management and elevate your design business to new heights, please follow the links in our show notes to see how more time to design can help you build a better business. Have a great week, and I will see you for our next design dialogue.